Tonight, in the hush that gathers after the last bright duty of the day has gone quiet, let us drift toward a kingdom that rests beneath a pale and patient moon. The towers are silvered, the gardens have folded in their fragrance. The windows of the upper halls hold faint squares of candlelight that grow fewer, then fewer still, until almost every room has surrendered to the dark. It is a peaceful darkness, the kind that settles softly over stone and ivy and sleeping rooftops, as if the whole world has been wrapped in one long exhale. There is no danger waiting in this story. There is no alarm to follow, no storm breaking at the gate, no urgent rider crossing a bridge. There is only a quiet night, an old palace, and one wakeful heart within it. So let your thoughts loosen a little. Let them unfasten one by one, as ribbons loosen from a sleeve after a celebration has ended. You do not need to hold them all. You do not need to carry the shape of the day any farther than this moment. You are here now, and the night is wide enough to keep watch while you rest. In that distant kingdom, everyone believed the palace must be the safest place in the world. Its walls were thick, its stores were full, its windows were glazed against winter, its hearths were swept and tended, its linens were changed before they could lose their fragrance. Musicians softened the evenings. Servants cushioned every small inconvenience before it could reach the royal room. And yet, in the highest chamber of the tallest wing, the princess of that kingdom could not sleep. She was not kept awake by thunder. She was not frightened by shadows, nor plagued by fever, nor troubled by dreams too sharp to bear. Her wakefulness was gentler than that, and in some ways more difficult to name. It came as a light ache beneath the ribs, a small hollow feeling that returned each night as soon as the final candle was lowered and the last soft-footed maid retreated through the door. She would lie upon embroidered pillows, beneath smooth blankets, listening to the silence arrange itself around her, and feel that something in her life was very beautiful and very far away at the same time. By day she moved through glitter and courtesy. The palace shone in color then. Pages hurried with folded cloths over their arms. Courtiers crossed polished floors in silks that murmured as they passed. In bright galleries, portraits looked down from golden frames with calm and practiced expressions. The queen received visitors beneath painted ceilings. The king consulted maps, reports, and sealed letters. Bells rang for meals, for lessons, for calls, for greetings, for departure. There was always a right hour for each thing, and a proper way to stand inside it. The princess had learned these forms as she learned music and reading and the names of neighboring rivers. She knew how to incline her head, how to answer gently, how to walk without haste and without noise, how to make other people comfortable, even when she herself felt curiously absent from her own days. Many who saw her thought she had been blessed with a natural ease. They mistook stillness for peace and grace for rest. Only she knew that sometimes she felt as though she watched her own life through clear glass, close enough to see every detail and yet not truly inside it. At night the palace changed. The last violins were tucked into their cases. Firelight withdrew into quiet coals. Long corridors, so splendid in daylight, grew deeper and emptier, lined with dark carpets and tapestries that seemed to absorb the hush rather than soften it. The fountains in the enclosed court no longer flashed and played for guests. They whispered to themselves in the courtyard shadows. Draughts slid under ancient doors. Somewhere far below, a servant latched a side entrance, and the small sound traveled upward through the sleeping stone. Her chamber was meant to invite sleep. The ceiling above her bed had been painted with a summer sky so delicate that swallows seemed forever mid-flight near a ring of cloud. Shelves of books lined one wall. A carved fireplace, braided in ivy and little hidden animals, held the last of the evening warmth. On a low table stood a silver tray with water in a blue glass, a small lamp, and a linen cloth. Lavender hung in a sachet near the bed curtains. Beeswax and faint rose lingered in the air. Everything around her belonged to comfort. Everything around her suggested that sleep should arrive easily and stay. But night after night, she remained awake. Once, when she was younger, maids had tried every gentle remedy that could be mentioned in whispers. Warm milk with spice, quiet songs, slower songs. The turning of pages by the fire, a hand laid lightly over hers until her breath steadied. A physician had recommended teas so mild they tasted only of warm water and hope. An old nurse from the countryside had suggested resting a cool cloth on the forehead while listening to a tale about sheep crossing a moonlit field. Nothing changed. The princess thanked them all, and in time the efforts became fewer, then fewer still, until her wakefulness was treated like weather no one could alter. She had tried once or twice to explain it. The queen had stroked her hair and told her that a thoughtful mind often needed gentler evenings. The king, though not unkind, reminded her that peace was a blessing not every household possessed. She knew they meant to comfort her. That almost made it harder. What answer could she give? That the safety around her sometimes felt polished rather than warm? That every hour of her life seemed arranged before she entered it? That she longed for something she could not name, and that the longing itself seemed to stand between her and sleep like a thin, invisible curtain? So she stopped explaining. And because she stopped explaining, the ache beneath her ribs grew quieter, but no smaller. It simply waited for night, and when night came, it returned. Sometimes, lying in the dark, she imagined other lives with no great plan behind them. A girl carrying bread home under her arm, while dusk settled over a village lane. A sister sweeping flour from a table before dawn. A boatwoman tying off a rope with cold hands and an unhurried mind. Someone crossing a field with no attendant and no title, answerable only to weather and hunger and the turn of the season. These were not grand fantasies. They did not glitter, but they had the softness of real things. And the princess found herself wondering what it might be like to belong to a day in that simple way. Not as a figure in it, but as a person among other people. On one quiet night, when the moon was almost full, and the palace had grown so still that even the coals seemed to breathe more slowly, the ache beneath her ribs did something it had never done before. It moved, not upward toward thought, but downward toward her feet. The princess opened her eyes. For a moment, she lay very still, listening. The room was unchanged. The lamp had burned low. Moonlight rested along the edge of the carpet and the carved arm of a chair. The old familiar sleeplessness was there, but it no longer felt trapped. It felt like a door standing slightly open. Slowly, she sat up, drew her bare feet to the floor, and let the coolness of the boards wake her in a different way. She did not light another candle. She knew the room by memory. At the foot of her bed stood a painted chest within it. Beneath folded shawls and gloves too plain for court, she had long ago tucked away a dark wool cloak given to her by an aunt who preferred riding in the countryside to receiving compliments in the city. The princess drew it out and slipped it over her nightdress. She tied it close at the throat. Then she exchanged her slippers for soft shoes suitable for silent corridors. No jewels, no comb with silver teeth, no ring that might catch the moon. She wished to move through the sleeping palace as if she were only another thread in its darkness. When she opened her chamber door, the corridor beyond lay in dim gray light. Tall windows at the far end held the moon. Portraits faded into blocks of shadow. The princess stepped out and closed the door without sound. She passed tables where flower vases cast patient silhouettes against the wall. She passed mirrors that, by day, returned to her the image everyone expected to see. Now they offered only a drifting figure in a dark cloak, half moon, half shadow, almost free of name. At the end of the west corridor stood two guards. They faced outward and did not move. Their spears caught a little light. Beyond them hung a tapestry older than the king, woven with a hunting scene, whose once bright greens had deepened with time into soft dusk colors. Near its edge, there was a narrow gap in the wall, where a small door had been hidden generations earlier for servants carrying trays and laundry between wings without disturbing ceremony. The princess had discovered it as a child during a game of hide and seek and had never forgotten. She slipped behind the tapestry, pressed her fingers to the cold latch, and eased the door inward. The air changed immediately. The hidden stairway smelled of damp stone and dust undisturbed by perfume. The steps were narrow and uneven with age. Moss touched the corners where the wall sweated in winter. Far below, a single torch burned in an iron bracket, its flame so small it did not disturb the dark, only suggested that it could be crossed. The princess rested one hand against the wall and descended, her breath calm, her heart strangely lighter with each turn. At the bottom of the stair stood an old gate banded with iron. It opened, not into the main court, where guards and lanterns would have told on her at once, but into a neglected side garden, once used by kitchen staff and gardeners. The hinges complained in the faintest whisper when she pulled. Then the gate gave way, and the night outside touched her face. It was colder than the palace air and far more alive. She stood for a moment beneath a pear tree grown wild against the wall and looked out over the sleeping city. Roofs folded into one another like dark quilts. Here and there a lantern burned in an upper room. Chimneys released the last patient ribbons of evening smoke. The moon laid silver across a narrow canal and caught on weather vanes, bells, shutter latches, the rim of a bucket beside a well. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then thought better of it. The world was not silent. It was listening. The princess took her first step beyond the little garden. Then another. The lane sloped gently between old stone walls where ivy made shadows of leaves. Her cloak brushed flower boxes and worn corners. She had no destination. That was part of the relief. No one had told her where to go, how long to remain, what she ought to notice, whom she must greet. The night accepted her without instruction. At the edge of a small square, she saw a candle lit in the window of a narrow house with crooked shutters and a roof that dipped slightly at one end, as if it had grown tired and settled there for good. The square itself was empty. A basin fountain stood in the center, dark and full of moonlight. The candle in the window leaned toward the glass in a way that made the room beyond feel inhabited, not merely occupied. And from inside came a low hum, untrained and unself-conscious, the sort of humming people do when they are not performing, but simply being alive. The princess crossed the square and stood beneath the window. Through a gap in the curtain, she saw an old man bent over a wooden bench, his shoulders narrow, his hands steady despite a tremor that lived in them when they rested. Shoes lay around him in pairs and single pieces, some polished, some cracked, some still caked at the edges with dried road. A kettle steamed on a little stove. A gray cat slept with one paw over its nose on the sill. The man drew waxed thread through leather with patient care, pausing now and then to sip from a blue mug. It was such a small scene, no ceremony, no lesson, no grand sorrow being cured before her eyes. Yet the princess felt her own breathing change. The room seemed arranged around usefulness and quiet companionship. Everything in it had been touched by hands. Everything had a purpose. Nothing pretended to be more than it was, as if sensing her gaze. The old man looked up. Their eyes met through the pane. The princess expected surprise, perhaps suspicion. Instead, he smiled as one might smile at a bird on the garden wall. A creature not expected, and yet not unwelcome. After a brief hesitation, she tapped softly on the door. He opened it with a creak that the cat acknowledged only by flattening one ear. "You're out late," he said in a voice worn by time and wood smoke. "I could not sleep," the princess answered, and because the hood shadowed her face, the words belonged to no rank at all. "Then come in from the chill," he said. "The night is long enough without standing in it alone." She stepped inside. Warmth gathered around her ankles first, then rose. The room smelled of leather, tea, old pine, and the faint rain scent that lives in well-used boots. The old man asked no question she did not wish to answer. He simply poured a second cup from the kettle and motioned toward a chair beside the bench. The cat opened one eye, judged her harmless, and returned to sleep. For a while, they said very little. The shoemaker worked, drawing thread, smoothing seams, trimming, pressing, checking the bend of a sole in his hands as if he were reading a long-traveled story written in ware. The princess watched. She had seen shoes in abundance all her life: satin slippers for dancing, delicate embroidered slippers for morning, fur-lined shoes for winter corridors, riding boots polished until they reflected the room. She had never really thought about what happened when such things wore thin, or whose patience returned them to use. At length she asked, "Do you work this late every night?" "Only on the nights that are too quiet," he said. "Hands are useful company." He lifted the shoe he was mending. "This pair belongs to a cooper's wife. She walks the market road every week in all weather. If I leave the seam as it is, it will split fully by Thursday. Better to set it right while the house is still asleep." The princess nodded, as though he had revealed something precious. After a while he added, not looking up, "My daughter used to talk while I worked. About birds, about weather, about people she passed on errands. Silly things, mostly. The sort of things you miss more than grand conversations when a house changes." The princess wrapped both hands around the cup. "Where is she now?" "Farther south, married, happy, I'm told." He smiled with one side of his mouth. "That should be enough. Most days it is. But old rooms sometimes remember voices after the voices are gone." His words settled softly between them. The princess understood more than she expected. It was not the same ache as hers, but it belonged to the same quiet family of human longings, those small empty spaces left by distance, by formality, by all of the things one cannot repair in the exact shape they were lost. He showed her how to hold the leather while he threaded a needle. He explained, half to himself, how a seam must be firm but not hard, close but not tight, or the shoe would crack in another place. The princess listened. She liked the sound of such careful knowledge. It did not press itself upon the world. It simply kept people walking. When at last she rose, the old man did not ask her name. "If the night sends you wandering again," he said, "you will find tea here." The princess thanked him and stepped back into the square. The candle remained in the window, the cat a small moon-gray curve upon the sill. As she walked on, she noticed that the ache beneath her ribs had changed. It had not vanished, but it no longer felt like an empty room. It felt like a room with a chair pulled nearer the fire. The city was beginning to pale at the edges. Dawn had not yet arrived, but it had sent a messenger. The air held that delicate before morning freshness, which seems almost to ring. The princess wandered without plan through lanes that grew narrower and quieter, until another scent found her before any sight did. Warm yeast, browning crust, melted butter, flour lifted by heat. She followed the scent around a corner and came to a bakery low to the street. Its windows fogged from within. Light glowed golden through the misted panes. The upper half of the door stood slightly open to let out steam. As she approached, she heard the steady thud of dough against wood, the scrape of a peel on brick, and a laugh so sleepy and sincere that it made her smile before she had reason. Inside, the bakery was all warmth and work. Boards darkened by years of kneading stretched along the room. Sacks of flour leaned against the wall in soft-shouldered rows. Trays waited beside the oven with their tins and cloths and little piles of seed. Two sisters moved through the heat with the ease of people who knew not only what to do, but who they were while doing it. The older one worked with a calm, unbroken rhythm. The younger one, round-cheeked and bright-eyed despite the hour, spoke to the dough as if it could hear encouragement. Both looked up when the princess stepped in. "Either you're very early," said the younger sister, dusting flour from her hands, "or very late." "I was walking," the princess said. "Then your feet deserve a bench The older one replied, "Sit there by the wall. The oven keeps that side warm." The princess obeyed. The bench had been polished smooth by years of use and heat. From the brick behind it seeped kindly through her cloak. She watched the sisters measure, fold, roll, and shape with the tenderness of repetition. Nothing in the room was hurried, though much was being done. The oven breathed. Dough yielded. Crusts darkened. Steam rose in mild clouds that carried the scent of grain and comfort through the room. The younger sister handed the older one a bowl, then glanced at the princess. "Can you braid?" she asked. "I don't know. Best answer in the world," said the younger one. "Means the morning can still improve." She pressed a small length of dough into the princess's hands. The princess had never been handed anything so warm and unfinished. It sagged softly between her fingers. The sisters showed her how to roll it long, then fold it over itself, not with force, but with trust in the dough's willingness to become. Her first attempt collapsed. Her second was crooked. The younger sister laughed, but not unkindly. "Not bad," she said. "It only looks like it got lost on the way to becoming bread." The princess laughed too, and the sound startled her with its own honesty. It did not belong to courtly amusement. It rose simply because something was funny, and because no one in the room required her to laugh beautifully. They worked a little in companionable quiet after that. Outside, dawn slowly untied the darkness from the rooftops. The first birds argued in the eaves. The city still slept, but the bakery had already begun its faithful conversation with morning. A tray came from the oven, shining and fragrant. The older sister tore a piece from a loaf, not yet fit to sell, and passed it to the princess without ceremony. "It will burn your fingers a little," she said. "That is how you know it is worth eating." The crust cracked. Steam escaped. The inside was tender and faintly sweet. The princess tasted it, and for an instant she could think of nothing at all beyond warmth. Beyond warmth, grain, and breath. It was one of the purest rests she had ever known. "No breakfast at the palace is ever this good," she murmured before she could stop herself. The younger sister, who was brushing flour from the table with quick, practical strokes, snorted. "That is because palaces make meals for admiration. Bread is made for hunger." The line was so simple that it stayed with the princess at once. When she stood to leave, the older sister wrapped a roll in cloth and tucked it into her hands. "For the road," she said. "Everything travels better with a little bread." The princess thanked them and stepped back into the morning edge of the world. The sky over the eastern wall had grown pearl-colored. Chimneys began to speak. Somewhere a cartwheel turned. The city was waking, and with it came the faintest tug of caution. Soon people would recognize faces, compare stories, carry news. She ought to return, and yet the old ache was softer now, almost smooth. It did not pull her home immediately. Instead, it let her wander a little farther, beyond the tighter streets, past a broken wall where ivy spilled in green shadows, and toward the fields that lay just outside the city like folded blankets waiting for sun. The meadow held the last coolness of night. Dew silvered the long grasses. Fence posts leaned with the patient crookedness of weathered wood. A thin mist rested low over the ground. The princess walked slowly, the bread wrapped beneath her cloak, the smell of earth rising around her. Here no bells rang. Here the morning assembled itself from bird calls, damp air, and the rustle of waking leaves. Then she heard it, a small sound, sharp and helpless, quickly swallowed by the grass. She stopped. It came again. Not a bird, not a child. Something lower and rougher. Following it, she moved through a stand of thistles to a patch of open ground where a young fox lay trapped in a wire snare. Its red coat muddied, one foreleg twisted at an angle that made the princess catch her breath. Beside it knelt a village boy, perhaps 16, perhaps older if wind and work had made him seem so. His shirt had been mended many times. His hair stood in sun-bleached tangles. His hands, though roughened, moved with remarkable gentleness. "You're all right," he murmured to the fox. Not because the world is kind, mind you, only because I was awake before it. He looked up at the princess, startled but not alarmed. There was no bow in him, no instant measuring of rank, only a quick assessment. Another human, perhaps useful, perhaps not. "Can you hold him steady?" he asked. "Not tight, just steady." The princess knelt opposite him. The fox trembled beneath her hand, its heartbeat racing like a small trapped bird. She swallowed her fear and did as the boy instructed, resting her palm lightly on the fur between its shoulders, letting her breath slow until the creature could feel something other than panic passing through her. The boy bent the wire back carefully, with a tool so worn it seemed more inherited than owned. He spoke to the fox all the while, in a low voice, not with nonsense comfort, but with the simple respect of one living creature addressing another. When the snare finally loosened, the fox did not leap away at once. It lay panting, eyes open, as if gathering itself from pain. Then, with one quick motion, it rose and limped into the grass, vanishing so completely that the field seemed to close behind it. The princess exhaled. The boy sat back on his heels. If the bone is only strained, he'll manage. Foxes are made of more patience than people think. "You do this often?" she asked. "Not often enough to get used to it," he said, "but enough to know that panic rarely helps first." He wiped his hands on his trousers and glanced at her. "You're not from the fields?" "No, I thought not." He smiled a little. "You held steady, though." The princess looked at the place where the fox had vanished. "I was trying not to make things worse. That is a talent more useful than most people are taught." They sat in the dew for a quiet minute. The sun had not yet risen, but the horizon was brightening behind the far trees. The boy plucked a bent blade of grass and wound it once around his finger. "I walk when I can't sleep," he said. "Better than lying still and making every thought into a larger thought." The princess turned to him with surprise. "You cannot sleep either?" "Sometimes," he shrugged. "There is always weather to worry over. Fences to mend, seed to buy, one thing or another. But the fields are better company than a ceiling. Out here, a thought can spread out and become less sharp." The princess knew at once that he had given her a kind of key. Not a grand truth, not something meant to be quoted in a polished hall. Only a small country wisdom spoken before sunrise, and because of that, all the more useful. When she rose, the boy did not ask where she lived. He only pointed toward the city road. "The ground gets slick near the ditch after dawn. Walk the higher path." She thanked him and did as he advised. By the time she reached the outer lane, the sun had begun to edge the clouds, and a new caution entered the day. She returned by the hidden gate, climbed the damp stair, crossed the silent corridor, and slipped back into her room just as servants in distant wings began to stir the palace awake. That morning, the princess slept for one narrow, shining hour. It was not much, but it was more than she had known in many months. And when she woke, the memory of the shoemaker's room, the bakery heat, and the fox's quick breath remained with her like warm stones carried in the pocket. The next night, she waited for sleep. She gave it every chance. She lay still, breathed slowly, and listened to the dark move around the room. But once again, the old wakefulness returned, only now it was changed. It no longer felt like an enemy pressing at her. It felt like a gentle hand at the shoulder, turning her toward the door. So she rose again. Cloak, shoes, corridor, tapestry, hidden stair, old gate. Already, the path had become easier. The city did not seem forbidden now. It seemed known by degrees. The lane beyond the side garden curved downward toward the river quarter, where merchants unloaded goods by day and fishermen mended nets in the afternoons. At night, the district emptied into a patient stillness, broken only by the soft knocking of water against wood. The harbor was modest compared with the palace docks used for state barges in summer. Here the piers were narrow, and repaired in places with timber of mismatched ages. Small boats rocked in slips like sleeping animals. Ropes creaked. A lantern swayed beneath a post and painted long gold scars across the black water. Reeds whispered along the farther bank. The princess stood listening, and it seemed to her that the river had no need to make a display of itself. It simply continued. At the end of the outer pier, one little boat had not yet been tied for the night. Beside it stood a woman with hair caught in a knot that the wind kept loosening, as if it had never agreed to the arrangement. Her hands were broad and rope-marked. She wore a shawl patched in 2 places and boots still damp from the bank. She turned when she heard the princess approach. "You, after a crossing?" the woman asked. "Or after quiet?" The princess considered the question and answered honestly. "Quiet, I think. Good," said the woman. "Crossings cost more." Before the princess could decide whether this was jest, the woman nodded toward the boat. "Come then. River's kinder than most company at this hour." The princess stepped aboard. The boards shifted softly beneath her feet. The woman pushed off without fuss. Oars entered the water with hardly more sound than a sleeve brushing a curtain. Soon the pier slid away, and the little harbor lights thinned behind them. They drifted along the slower edge of the current, where moonlight lay broad and unbroken. Trees on the bank leaned over the water with dark, private thought. Once, a bird startled from the reeds, skimmed low, and disappeared. The princess sat on an upturned crate near the bow, and let the motion of the boat loosen something inside her she had not realized was clenched. For a long time, neither spoke. When the woman finally did, it was as if she were continuing a conversation the river had already begun. "People think rest means staying still," she said. "Maybe for chairs, not always for hearts." The princess traced one finger along the cool rim of the boat. "How do you know when to come out here?" "When the inside tide rises." The woman gave a small shrug. "Some folk pace, some bake, some mend nets or count coins or talk to themselves until dawn. I row, not far, just enough to remember. I am not tied to every thought that knocks in the dark." The princess smiled faintly. "That sounds wise. It sounds like an old woman who cannot always sleep." The rower dipped her oars again. Wisdom is mostly the name people give when they see a habit survive many winters. The boat carried them toward the wider bend where the current slowed before the marshes. The woman nodded toward the water. "See how the moon breaks when the oar enters. People are like that. Disturb them too much, and all they reflect is trouble. Leave them a little room, and they remember how to hold light." The princess had no answer, but she felt the words pass through her like the river itself, not forcing anything, only making space. When at last they turned back, the harbor seemed farther away than it should have been, as if the river had folded time differently around them. The woman brought the boat to the pier and steadied it with one hand while the princess stepped ashore. "You owe me nothing," the woman said before the princess could reach for the little purse hidden beneath her cloak. "Take the quiet and spend it well." The princess thanked her and walked back through the lane beside the dark warehouses. Her thoughts felt farther apart now, separated by stretches of water and reed and moonlit air. Even when she returned to her chamber before dawn, the river remained in her, and the silence in the room no longer seemed pressed against her ears. It had depth. On another night, when the moon had thinned and grown clearer, her wandering led her eastward along a path bordered by wild lavender. The city fell behind. Trees gathered ahead. This part of the kingdom had once been royal hunting ground, then monastery wood, then neither, and so it belonged in small ways to everyone, and to no one. The trunk stood pale in the dark, smooth in some places, rough in others, holding the scent of bark, moss, and old leaves. The forest did not feel lonely. It felt attentive. Deep among the trees she saw a lantern, glowing beside a cottage barely larger than a stable room. A wooden sign, faded by weather, hung above the door. The painted letters had worn thin, but in the lantern light they could still be read. Library. The princess paused. She had expected perhaps a forester's hut or a charcoal burner's shelter. A library in the woods seemed at once improbable and perfectly right. Inside, the room breathed of paper, dust, lamp oil, and wool. Shelves climbed every wall. Some books leaned on one another like sleepy companions. Others lay in careful stacks, waiting to be reshelved. A faded rug covered most of the floor. 2 armchairs sat near the hearth, where embers glowed under a bank of ash. In one chair, wrapped in a shawl the color of old rain, sat an elderly woman reading by the lamplight. She looked up over the rim of her spectacles and regarded the princess with no more surprise than if a leaf had drifted in at the window. "You may close the door if you like," she said. "The night is welcome, but drafts are not." The princess did so. "Is this truly a library?" she asked in a whisper that the room itself seemed to require. "It is if enough books have arrived and enough people have needed somewhere quiet to read them," the woman replied. "Those are the only qualifications worth respecting." The princess smiled and took the empty chair opposite. The cushion settled around her. On the table between them lay a small stack of books. The woman nudged one forward. "That one is gentle," she said. "Not every wakeful night needs a difficult book." The princess opened it. The story inside was simple. A shepherd who learned the names of stars from a grandmother, who never left the valley and yet seemed to know the sky better than kings who crossed seas. The prose moved slowly. It did not ask to be admired. It merely kept company. Soon the princess felt the remarkable comfort of reading, not to improve herself, not to prepare for discussion, not to remember facts for a tutor, but simply to rest inside another mind's quiet. After some time, the keeper set aside her own volume and said, "People imagine libraries are built to answer questions, aren't they? Sometimes. More often, they are built to let a person keep a question nearby without fear." The princess rested her hand on the open page. "And if the question never fully leaves?" The old woman smiled. "Then perhaps it grows older beside you and loses the habit of waking you every night." The princess did not know why that comforted her so much, only that it did. Around them, the library held its hush like a bowl holds water, naturally and without strain. The logs settled, the lamp flame wavered. Outside, a branch tapped once against the roof and then was still. When she finally rose to go, the old woman did not ask for a promise or a name. "The path is clearer if you listen to the owls," she said. "They have no interest in human confusion, and so they seldom mislead." The princess laughed softly. "May I come again?" "You already have," the keeper said, as if this answered everything. She stepped back into the trees carrying no book, and yet something had been lent to her all the same. The dark no longer felt like a blankness to be crossed. It felt like a place where certain things could gently remain unresolved. On the next waking night, wind moved through the kingdom in uneasy currents. Clouds crossed the moon in the palace. Shutters clicked faintly in their frames. The princess hesitated before rising, wondering whether the storm of branches and weather would sharpen her thoughts rather than soothe them. But the ache beneath her ribs had become a familiar guide by then, and she trusted that motion might yet soften what stillness made too bright. Her steps turned toward the high ridge west of the city, where a road ran dangerously close to a long fall into the valley. In winter, fog wrapped the routes so tightly that even locals lost their bearings. At intervals, along the cliff path, small lanterns had once been mounted on posts. Many had fallen into neglect, yet, as the princess walked, she saw points of amber glow appearing one by one in the wind-dark distance, each a tiny certainty held in glass. At the third lantern, she found the man who was lighting them. He wore a weathered coat and carried a satchel of oil, matches, and folded wicks. His beard had gone almost entirely white, but his movements were deliberate and competent. He seemed like one of those people who had spent a lifetime doing necessary things so consistently that they were no longer able to think of themselves as remarkable for it. "Evening," he said, as though meeting a traveler at noon. "Mind your footing. The ground near the edge gives way politely first, and then all at once." The princess obeyed. Wind lifted her cloak. Below them the valley lay dark, except where villages showed a few pinpricks of domestic light. "You light all of these yourself?" she asked. "When weather asks for it, every night?" "Only Lee. The nights that might persuade a person they've taken the right path when they haven't." He touched a flame to another wick. "Fog is bad for that. So is grief. So is thinking too hard while walking." The princess watched the lantern bloom. It cast a circle not large enough to banish the dark, yet more than enough to show the road. The keeper handed her a match. "Here, the next one's yours, if you like." She moved to the next post. Her first strike failed in the whip. The second held. She cupped the match, touched it to the wick, and waited until the little flame steadied behind the glass. "Better than one strong beacon," the man said, moving on. "A traveler rarely needs to see the whole distance. Usually they only need the next few steps to stop feeling lost." They continued together. Lantern after lantern answered. The work was repetitive in the kindest way. Match, shield, touch, wait. Match, shield, touch, wait. The princess found herself breathing with the rhythm of it. She thought of the shoemaker's thread, the baker's kneading, the boatwoman's oars, the library pages turned beneath a lamp. So much of peace, she began to understand, was not made from great revelation. It was built from small repeated acts that kept a way open through the dark. "Have you ever been lost?" she asked. The keeper laughed under his breath. "Often. But less dramatically than young people hope. Mostly, I've been lost in my own head while standing exactly where I ought to be." That answer pleased her more than any noble saying could have done. By the time the last lantern was lit, the wind had eased. Clouds shifted. The moon appeared between them like a coin newly found. The road glimmered. The keeper packed away his things with no triumph, only the satisfaction of a task placed gently back in order. As the princess turned toward home, she felt something new in her chest. The old hollow had not simply softened now, it had begun to fill. Not with certainty, not with explanation, with little lights. Enough to see by. Later still came the night of the market. The square where merchants sold cloth and apples and copper pans by day stood mostly empty under the moon. Stalls had been covered, ropes hung slack. A cat threaded itself through baskets turned upside down to keep off dew. Yet in the very center of the square stood one open booth, draped in dark blue cloth, lit by 3 hanging lamps, whose glass had been tinted with such subtle color that their glow seemed almost underwater. Behind the table sat a merchant wrapped in a plain cloak with a silver clasp. Their age could not be guessed. Their voice, when they spoke, might have belonged to anyone who had ever stayed awake long enough to become patient. "Looking for something?" they asked. The princess almost said no. Then she remembered the shoemaker's tea, the bread in her hands, the fox's pulse, the river, the library, the lantern. On each of those nights, she had found something without knowing beforehand to seek it. "I'm not sure," she answered. "Excellent," said the merchant. Certainty makes poor room for discovery. Upon the table lay objects both ordinary and strange. A brass compass, whose needle spun lazily and settled nowhere. A vial of river pebbles, polished to milkiness. A child's wooden horse with one wheel missing. A square of old embroidered cloth mended in 3 colors. A little mirror framed in dark wood. Not silver-backed and grand like the mirrors in the palace. Smaller, older, the kind of mirror that might once have sat on a washstand near a cracked basin in a room where people rose before sunrise. The princess reached for it. At first she saw only herself in shadow. Hood, pale hands, eyes dark from too many wakeful nights. Then the surface seemed to deepen. The face remained her own, but around it appeared other versions of the same self, not altered by costume or crown, only illuminated by circumstance. There she was in the shoemaker's room, one hand around a blue cup. There with flower on her sleeve and laughter half formed. There in dew-heavy grass beside the fox. There in the little boat under a low moon. There in the library, lamplight, head bent over a page. They're striking a match against the wind. The princess looked up sharply. The merchant was neither startled nor impressed. "Well, of course," said the merchant. "You were busy forgetting to arrange yourself." The words entered her without resistance. For all her life she had been taught refinement, presentation, composure, poise. None of those were useless, but the mirror showed her something those lessons had never meant to reveal. That the truest shape of her face appeared when she was not trying to resemble what others expected. When her hands were occupied, when attention moved outward in kindness, when she was among useful things and unceremonious people, when she belonged to a moment instead of to an image. "May I buy it?" she asked. The merchant smiled. "You already paid. It costs exactly the amount of wandering required to recognize what it shows." The princess carried the mirror away, tucked beneath her cloak. Behind her, the blue-draped stall grew dimmer. The whether the lamps were actually lowered, or the square itself was swallowing the sight, she could not tell. It did not matter. The mirror was cool against her side. The knowledge it reflected was warmer after that night. Her steps no longer felt driven only by sleeplessness. They felt led by rhythm, as if each previous wandering had tuned her to the next. Middle hours of night, once so hard to bear, became something gentler and opening. A hush, a soft stretch of unclaimed time in which she could move lightly through the kingdom and gather from it whatever small wisdom the dark was willing to offer. On the night, she found the musician. The air was unusually still. Even the leaves on the lower branches seemed reluctant to disturb it. The princess walked farther than before, beyond the lavender path and the little library, to a grove of ancient trees, whose trunks rose broad and pale from the moss like pillars in a forgotten hall. There, in a clearing where moonlight sifted down, as if through clear water, sat a musician holding a small stringed instrument across their lap. The instrument was not polished for show. Its wood had been darkened by touch. The musician's cloak had been patched at the elbow. Their hair shone silver where the moon caught it. Without looking up, they played a melody so simple that it seemed at first less like a performance than like breathing translated into sound. The princess sat on a stone at the edge of the clearing and listened. The melody did not travel in a straight line. It circled, returned, lingered, drifted. Leaves above them answered in slight shivers. Somewhere beyond the clearing an owl called once, and then ceded the silence back to the strings. The princess felt her shoulders lower without intending to lower them. The music was not asking her to understand anything. It was only making space inside the night. After a long time, the musician said, still not looking up, "These trees prefer company that knows how not to interrupt. I hope I have not failed them." The princess answered softly, "Not yet." A faint smile passed over the musician's face. The tune changed, growing slower, sparser. Between the notes there opened stretches of listening so wide that the princess became aware of other sounds within them. Sap moving in old wood, insects hidden in bark, the low almost sound of roots holding earth together below the surface. "I used to think silence was empty," she said. "That is because you were taught silence in rooms built to display authority," the musician replied. "Forest silence is different. It is full of things willing to share the dark with you." The princess closed her eyes. She thought of the palace at night, its corridors, elegant and echoing. She thought of this grove, where the hush felt inhabited rather than vacant. The difference entered her more deeply than explanation could have done. One silence had watched her from afar, the other sat beside her. The musician placed a small wooden charm in her hand when at last the song ended. It had been carved in the shape of a leaf, smooth at the edges from being turned over many times by thoughtful fingers. "For the nights you forget how to listen," they said. The princess thanked them and left the grove without hurry. The melody followed her, not as a tune she could repeat, but as a pace her body remembered. That night, back in her room, she lay down before dawn and felt no need to force anything. Whether sleep came or not seemed, for once, less important than the fact that she had stopped feeling alone inside wakefulness. By then many nights had passed. The kingdom beyond the palace had changed shape in her mind. No longer a distant map, no longer an arrangement of obligations and subjects and territories described by tutors. It had become a living weave of small human lights, a bench by a stove, a warm loaf, a muddy fox's fur, a rocking boat, a reading chair, a lantern on a cliff, a mirror in a market, a melody under old trees. Each place had given her something slight enough to carry. Together they amounted to more than slightness. They amounted to belonging, and yet she did not know this fully until the night the hill called her. It was not a grand hill, not the sort from which generals observed maneuvers or nobles posed for painters. It rose simply beyond the western meadows, where wildflowers grew in the warmer months and hardy grass silvered in winter. A crooked tree stood near its crown, bent permanently east by years of weather. The princess had seen it from carriages and tower windows all her life. She had never climbed it. That night the sky was deep and clear. The stars seemed numerous enough to make the dark feel companionable rather than large. The princess walked the familiar route out of the palace, through the sleeping city, past the first fields, and onward until the path grew narrow beneath her feet. Dew had settled. Her cloak gathered the scent of grass. A breeze moved steadily over the land. Neither cold nor warm, only clean. She climbed slowly. Halfway up she turned and looked back. The kingdom spread below her in soft radiance. The city walls made a patient curve. Roofs layered into one another in dark folds. Here and there small lights remained where bakers would already be awake, where a mother soothed a child, where someone old and thoughtful had risen before dawn. The river shone like a ribbon, pulled through the sleeping town. Beyond it, fields and woods patched the earth in long, dim shapes. Even the palace, with all its towers and courts and ordered beauty, appeared from here as part of the larger whole, rather than the center of it. The princess reached the crest and sat beneath the crooked tree. The grass bent around her and straightened again in the wind. She drew the loaf cloth from her pocket, though the bread it had held on another morning was long gone. The cloth still smelled faintly of flour. She laid it beside her on the ground as if marking a little place among all her remembered kindnesses. Then, without planning to do so, she let herself lean back into the hill. The earth was cool. The sky was vast, but not indifferent. It was merely there, patient and unhurried. Above her the stars kept their distant watch. Around her the kingdom breathed in many rooms and lanes and fields. Within her, thoughts passed not as a crowd now, but as separate travelers, each with room enough to go on quietly. The shoemaker's careful hands came to mind, the sisters laughing in oven heat, the fox's quick pulse settling under her palm, the slow pull of oars, the dry whisper of a page turning, the line of lanterns on the cliff, her own face in the dark-framed mirror, made real by use rather than display. The old grove listening with her. She understood then so gently that the realization scarcely felt like a thought at all, that what had been missing from her life was not comfort, not gratitude, not discipline, not affection. It was contact. She had been standing too far from the substance of living, watching days constructed around her without ever pressing her own hands into them. Sleep had not refused her out of cruelty. It had lingered beyond reach because some deeper part of her had known she was not yet fully home inside her own life. The understanding brought no drama with it, no tears, no sudden wish to overturn the palace or denounce her station or escape forever. The kingdom did not need less of her. It needed more of her, but differently, more awake by day, more real in small things, more willing to step beyond the polished glass and be touched by grain, weather, work, kindness, uncertainty, and the ordinary tender labor by which other people kept the world from falling apart. The wind moved through the grass again. The princess folded one hand over the other on her chest and closed her eyes for a moment. Not to force sleep, only to rest them. The darkness behind her lids was no longer crowded. It had the same depth as the river, the same inhabited hush as the grove, the same patient distance between lights as the cliff road. Her body, which had waited so long at the threshold of rest, seemed at last to recognize the way home. Breath by breath, she grew heavier in the most natural manner. The hill supported her. The bent tree kept its quiet company. Somewhere far below, a cart moved along an early lane. Somewhere else, a rooster tested the edge of dawn and thought better of being first. The world did not stop for her sleeping. That, too, was a comfort. She no longer needed all of existence to arrange itself around her in order to rest. She only needed to trust that life could continue kindly while she let go. And so sleep came, not dramatically, not as a curtain falling or a spell suddenly spoken. It arrived as if it had been walking toward her from a long distance all along, and had finally reached the hilltop in time to lie down beside her. Her thoughts thinned, her hands softened, the ache beneath her ribs, once the faithful herald of every wakeful night, dissolved so quietly, she scarcely noticed when it was gone. She dreamed then, though in the morning she would remember the dream only in fragments. Warm bread torn open, lanterns burning in fog, pages turning themselves in a room with no draught, a boat drawn by moonlight instead of oars, a fox crossing a field untroubled, the sound of strings among leaves. None of it was grand, all of it was enough. Below, the kingdom stirred little by little toward dawn. In the palace, servants woke and crossed corridors with covered lamps. Fires were coaxed back to life. Water was carried. The first shutters opened. In the city, flour was measured, nets checked, stable doors unbarred. Along the cliff road, the lanterns still glowed in their last usefulness. In the little house near the square, an old shoemaker slept in his chair for a brief and honest quarter hour before daylight work resumed. Somewhere in the eastern woods, the library keeper put another log on the embers and opened a book in the patient confidence that stories do not resent being interrupted. The boatwoman watched the tide change color. The village boy inspected the higher path where the ground went slick near the ditch. None of them knew that the princess slept at last on the hill above the kingdom. Perhaps that was fitting. Their gifts had never been given for recognition. They had simply lived as they knew how to live, and in doing so had lit for her a road no single person could have described in full. A seam mended here, a loaf shared there, a creature steadied, a boat untied, a page opened, a lantern raised, a mirror held up. A song played slowly enough for silence to answer. Such things did not look powerful from a distance. Yet together, they had done what luxury and instruction and good intentions alone had not done. They had taught her how to belong to the world she inhabited. The night on the hill did not solve everything. No true rest ever makes such a noisy promise. Morning would still come with its duties. The palace would still be the palace. The king would still expect reports. The queen would still host callers. There would be letters, visitors, ceremonies, decisions, rooms full of polished conversation. But now there would also be a memory carried beneath all that brightness, that another life pulsed quietly underneath the formal one, and that she could touch it, return to it, learn from it, bring some of its warmth back with her into the day. Perhaps that is the gentlest kind of change, not an overturned world, not a dramatic escape, only a heart that has moved a little closer to truth and therefore finds the dark less sharp, the silence less lonely, the future less sealed. If you like, stay with the princess there a little longer. The grass beneath her is cool and springing. The tree leans over her in the old eastward way. Dawn has not yet fully taken the stars. The whole kingdom is neither asleep nor awake, but resting in that tender border between the two where everything seems softer, around the edges. There is nowhere else you need to go right now. No corridor you must cross. No answer you must produce before morning. No thought you must chase to its final chamber. Like the river, your mind can widen and darken and still hold light. Like the lantern road, you do not need the whole distance at once. Like bread in the hands of patient bakers, some things become what they are only through warmth and time. Like pages in a quiet room, questions can rest beside you without demanding a conclusion before sleep. Like music among old trees, silence can be shared, and if there is, somewhere within you, a room that has felt too orderly to be warm, too composed to be restful, perhaps it too can change, not all at once, but by small human light. Perhaps you need only the next few steps. A cup set down near a stove, a window with one candle, a field before sunrise, a patient hand on rough fur, the dip of oars, a page turned, a wick catching, a mirror that tells the truth without accusation, a melody with enough space in it for your own breathing to join. The princess sleeps on. The kingdom brightens very slowly around her. Soon the sun will reach the upper windows of the palace. Soon a maid, finding the bed untouched, will speak in alarm and then relief when searchers discover their sleeping princess beneath the crooked tree, cloaked in dawn, entirely safe. Soon she will wake, not startled, but settled. She will rise with grass pressed lightly into her sleeves and hair touched by wind. And though she may tell no one the whole of where she has wandered, something in her manner will have changed. She will pause longer with the servants who bring water. She will ask a baker's question at breakfast rather than merely praise the arrangement of fruit. She will request that the old lanterns on the cliff be kept in repair. She will open windows more often. She will walk in the gardens without attendants when she can. She will read, not only for duty, but for companionship. She will listen. And when sleeplessness returns, as sometimes it will, she will no longer meet it as a stranger. She will know that wakefulness can be carried outdoors, across stone, into moonlight, toward lives still glowing quietly beyond the palace wall. She will know that rest is not always summoned. Sometimes it is met, gently, after enough wandering has taught the heart where home really is. So let this story remain open here. The way dawn remains open when it first enters a room, not shut, not concluded too firmly, merely softened into morning. The hill is still beneath her. The stars are fading one by one. The kingdom continues. The wind keeps moving through the grass, and sleep, having finally found her, has no need to hurry away. You may stay there too as long as you like. Let the dark grow lighter without effort. Let the last thoughts of the night become wider and farther apart. Let them drift like lantern reflections moving down a quiet river. Let them thin like mist over the fields. Let them settle like dust in a library after the page is turned. Nothing more is required. The road is lit enough. The water is calm enough. The room is warm enough. The night has done its work. And somewhere, just beyond the final little border between wakefulness and dreaming, a princess sleeps beneath a crooked tree while an old kingdom breathes around her, patient and kind. After that first sleep on the hill, the princess would remember not a single grand lesson, but a series of ordinary textures that seemed to have stitched her rest together. Waxed thread pulled through leather, flour warmed by hands, wet grass against her knees, the hollow knock of water under a boat, the whisper of pages brushed by turning fingers, the faint flare of a wick taking light, the grain of a wooden charm resting in her palm. Each memory was small enough to overlook, and for that reason, each one had entered her more deeply than grand instruction ever had. There was, in all those nights, a pattern she had not noticed while living it. Whenever a place or a conversation asked something of her energy, the world had answered with gentleness. Not long after the shoemaker's sadness, tea and thread, after the fox's fear, dawn in open field, After the dark water and the strange humility of drifting, a room full of books that did not demand conclusion. After the high cliff and all the little flames, a market mirror that returned no accusation, only recognition. Again and again, the kingdom had said, in its unadorned way, you may look, you may feel, you may carry the shape of this, and then you may rest. This was the hidden mercy of the nights. They did not merely stir her, they soothed her after stirring. They did not leave her standing raw in revelation. Every difficult thought was followed by a softer place to set it down. In this way, the kingdom itself behaved like a wise storyteller, never tightening the thread too long without loosening it, never leading her too near loneliness without placing some warmth beside it. Perhaps that is why, when she later tried to understand what had changed, she could not point to a single turning. The change had been cumulative, like dusk, like tide, like a loaf rising invisibly under cloth. She had been gathered back into herself by increments. If you were to walk through that kingdom in the years that followed, you might notice only little alterations, and perhaps think little of them. A side gate in the palace wall repaired rather than sealed. A bench placed in a garden where once there had only been ornamental gravel. A small library room established in one of the lesser towers for servants, children, and anyone else who wanted a quiet chair and a borrowed book on stormy afternoon. Lanterns along the western cliff cleaned and maintained before the fog season began. Orders sent, politely but firmly, that bread from the royal kitchens be carried each evening to the infirmary, and the old quarter before leftover. Sugared cakes were set aside for morning trays. Nothing revolutionary, nothing meant to startle history, and yet all of it grew out of one person learning, slowly, that comfort becomes truer when shared. The princess herself remained graceful, but her grace changed texture. It lost something brittle at court. She still wore silk when silk was required, still answered ambassadors with intelligence, still moved through ceremony with steadiness. Yet those who knew how to notice such things saw that she no longer seemed carved from expectation alone. Sometimes she paused to speak with the laundress carrying linens. Sometimes she asked the kitchen steward which baker had taught that day's apprentice to braid dough so neatly. Sometimes she stood at a window looking not beyond the city, but into it, as if attending to lives there rather than merely ruling from above them. And in the evenings, before withdrawing, she took to walking the outer gallery that faced west. Not always for long, sometimes only for the length of one cooling sky. She would rest her hands on the old stone and wait for the first lanterns to bloom in the streets. She never watched them as a person starved watches a feast from afar. She watched them with the affection of someone who knew each light belonged to a room, a task, a pair of hands, a life moving through its own quiet necessities. The distance between her and the kingdom had narrowed, not vanished, perhaps never entirely, but narrowed enough that she no longer felt made of glass. There were still wakeful nights after that first true sleep. No story honest enough for rest would pretend otherwise. Weather has its moods. The body remembers old habits. Thoughts return in altered clothes. But the sleeplessness no longer entered her chamber like an unnamed sovereign. It came like weather through an open field, sometimes gray, sometimes passing, sometimes lingering, never wholly mysterious. She learned not to panic when it arrived. She learned, instead, to ask what shape of gentleness might meet it. On some nights that answer was movement. She would rise and walk the narrow corridor where moonlight crossed the floorboard. She would touch the carved back of a chair, lift the latch of the hidden door, and let the old stair carry her down into breathing dark. On other nights, the answer was not to leave at all. She would sit by the banked fire with a plain blanket around her shoulders and open one of the quiet books borrowed from the forest keeper. Or she would eat a small piece of bread kept from supper, not because hunger had caused her waking, but because warm. Simple food still spoke to something in her more truthfully than sugared delicacies, At times she would simply open the little dark framed mirror and look into it until she remembered that she did not need to be beautiful or composed in order to be real. Then, remembering, she could rest, and because this is a story made for night, it may be worth lingering over those quieter wakeful return, the ones that hold no adventure, only the tender practice of not turning wakefulness into fear. Imagine her, then, not on the hill, and not in the city lanes, but in her own chamber, after midnight. The fire is only embers. Moonlight touches the edge of the shelf where her books stand. The palace is still. She is awake, yes, but the waking has lost its old sharpness. She rises, wraps herself in a wool shawl, and pours a little water into a cup. Perhaps she adds honey, if the season is cold. Perhaps she opens a casement, just enough to feel the air move. Beneath her window, the garden trees hold darkness among their leaves. Somewhere far below, a late servant closes a door with care. She does not think, "I am trapped in this hour." She thinks only, "The night is not finished with me yet." Then maybe she sits and mends something small with her own hands, not because no one else could do it, but because the shoemaker taught her that useful patience can settle the heart. A loose ribbon on a sleeve, a torn hem on a household cloth, a glove split at the thumb. The stitches are not perfect, they do not need to be. She draws the thread through and through, firm but not hard, close but not tight. The rhythm steadies her, the room changes around work. It becomes less a chamber of waiting, and more a place where time is allowed to pass kindly. Or perhaps she remembers the bakery and warms a little milk over a lamp, stirring in cinnamon, the way the younger sister once suggested bread should always be praised more by appetite than by elegance. The scent fills the air. Steam rises. She holds the cup in both hands and feels that warmth move through her as a quiet answer to the old invisible emptiness. Sometimes she takes out the wooden leaf charm and rolls it between finger and thumb until the grain of it becomes familiar again. She listens, as the musician taught her, not for a dramatic sign, but for the layered life already present in the stillness. Fabric settling, a rafter answering the weather, the small shift of coals, her own breathing, the wind feeling its way around the tower. Shared silence, not lonely silence. At other times, she remembers the lantern keeper and imagines the path in small stages. She does not ask sleep to come from a great distance, all at once. She asks only for the next slight easing, one shoulder softer, one thought less bright, one breath unhooked from worry, one drift downward. That is enough. But as a series of little permissions. And if, on some particular night, none of those gentle practices bring sleep, she does not call the night wasted. She has learned too much from bakers and rowers and readers to treat quiet hours as failures merely because they remain quiet. Some nights are for sleeping, some are for floating, some are for watching moonlight on the floor until dawn loosens the dark and the world begins again. Even these nights can be survived softly if you were to ask what hidden invitation lies inside her story. It would not be an instruction barked from the end of a tale. It would be something subtler. It would be this. Perhaps the soul rests more easily when life no longer feels observed from afar. Perhaps we tire not only from labor and worry, but from standing too long at a distance from what is plain and human and warm. Perhaps some of the deepest comfort available to us is hidden, not in spectacle, but in ordinary contact bread, weather, work, water, pages, music, lamplight, being welcomed without explanation. That was the treasure buried beneath the princess's wandering. Not rebellion, not escape, nearness. Years later, when children in the kingdom heard a softened version of the story from grandparents at bedside, they were told that the princess once went walking at night, because the moon had cast a spell of wakefulness over the palace. The older people smiled at that and let the tale stand. It was easier to say spell than longing, easier to say moon than distance from one's own life. But in the houses where age had made people honest, the story was told more quietly. There, they said, the princess had simply needed to learn that a kingdom was not a painted map, and a heart was not a polished room, and sleep did not always come to those who were most protected. Sometimes it came to those who had finally touched the texture of things. And perhaps that is why, in time, the princess became known less for her sleepless youth than for the tone she brought to the kingdom when she grew into her responsibilities. She was neither the loudest nor the most glamorous ruler her people had ever known. Songs written in her honor were rarely martial. They tended instead toward harvest hymns, river ballads, winter fireside songs, and little verses children could remember while carrying baskets. Under her care, storehouses were checked before festivals were announced. Roads were mended before arches were decorated. The outer districts received lanterns. The infirmary windows were reglazed before new banners were commissioned for the throne hall. It was said, not without affection, that she governed like someone who had once learned to love the invisible labor beneath visible beauty. She did not tell anyone about the mirror, though she kept it. Nor did she forget the hidden gate, even after it became more sensible for her to move through the kingdom by day with escort and heraldry. She sometimes visited the old places in less formal ways. She sent leather from the palace stores to the shoemaker when a wet season was hard on trade, though she did so through intermediaries and without a royal seal. She bought bread from the sisters whenever court kitchens could not object. She funded a proper shelter near the western fields where injured animals might be brought. She had the river pier repaired after storm damage. She requested copies of quiet books from monasteries and had them placed in common reading rooms. None of these things were done to repay some debt she imagined she owed. They were simply the outward habits of an inward understanding. There is something particularly restful, is there not, in imagining a life changed, not by one blazing revelation, but by many mild ones. A life turned a few degrees toward warmth and patience, until, without fanfare, it begins to cast a kinder light. So as the story thins toward its last softness, let the larger shapes recede and the smaller ones remain. A wool cloak on a peg by the bed, a side gate remembering the pressure of a careful hand, a cat sleeping through the opening of a door, thread drawn steadily, bread cooling on a rack, mist over a field, a fox disappearing into grass, oars making circles in black water, a lamp by a reading chair, lanterns holding the road through fog, the little mirror dark as a pond, strings answering leaves, a crooked tree keeping watch over sleep, and let all of them gather now, not as separate scenes, but as one long permission. You do not have to solve the entire kingdom tonight. You do not have to understand every corridor of your own thoughts. You do not have to be perfectly calm before rest is allowed. You may simply move a little closer to whatever is real and gentle. You may take the next few steps by lantern light. You may sit in the warm corner of the bakery while the world is still blue with early morning. You may drift on dark water without deciding anything. You may read one quiet page. You may let a song go unfinished. You may lie down beneath the bent tree and trust that the world can continue breathing while you sleep. The princess did, and because she did, the story remains open enough for you to rest inside it. Dawn comes more fully now to the hill. The first true band of gold has touched the farthest ridge. Birds begin in earnest. The grass no longer holds night alone. It holds morning, too. Somewhere down in the city, a door opens on its hinge, and the day, which has waited with admirable patience, finally enters. Yet the princess sleeps a little longer, not because she is hiding from daylight, but because the body, once it has trusted rest again, knows how to receive a complete measure of it. Soon she will wake. Soon she will stand. Soon the hill will shake the dew from her hem as she makes her way back down. Soon her path will cross the lanes and gates and stairs in reverse. Soon she will return to rooms she once found too polished to comfort her. But those rooms will no longer be empty of life. She will carry life into them. That may be the gentlest promise in all of this. Not that we must flee our lives in order to rest, but that we may return to them, changed enough to inhabit them more truly. So let the ending stay loose, let the hill remain, let the road remain. Let the lanterns keep their low amber watch in memory. Let the river continue under the bridge, let the bakeries warm before dawn. Let the books rest on their shelves. Let the musician's last note still hover somewhere among the trees. Let the princess sleep just a little while longer, while the kingdom, wide and ordinary and dear, goes on being itself around her. And if sleep has not yet reached you, there is no need to hurry toward it. The story knows how to wait. It can sit beside you like the library keeper. It can hand you one warm piece of bread and nothing more. It can row without speaking. It can mend a seam in silence. It can light only the next lamp. It can remain with you in the dark without demanding that the dark be solved. That, too, is a kind of rest. So breathe once more as the hill brightens. The palace is far enough away. The grass is cool enough. The sky is open enough. The night has loosened. The morning has not yet made its full claims. Between them there is this tender borderland, and in it a sleeping princess, a listening kingdom, and the soft knowledge that home may be made not only of walls and titles, but of nearness, usefulness, warmth, and the quiet courage to belong. Stay there as long as you need.